Welcome back in here to Live Now from Fox. I am Andy Mack. We are hearing from different lawmakers, including here on Live Now from Fox, the congressman from Washington, Adam Smith, saying he has not heard any information about what was involved in Epic Fury, and he's going to have to wait another several days to hear potentially what is involved, as we are expecting this here on Live Now from Fox. I want to put up a post on social media from one of our Reuters reporters, Phil Stewart, saying Rubio, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense Hegseth, others will brief the full membership of chambers of that Congress on Iran on Tuesday. So they have to wait not just to Monday, but until Tuesday to see what is unfolding there. Let's be joined right now by congressional reporter with the Washington Examiner, Lauren Green. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. And obviously, lots of pressing questions from lawmakers. What are you hearing about this at this hour? What potentially information could be shared at that meeting?
So there's a lot of moving parts. House Republicans had a meeting today at 4 o'clock. House Democrats have a meeting at 8 p.m. tonight. We are seeing that these lawmakers are going to get briefed Tuesday. The Senate is going to get briefed earlier in the afternoon, and then the House is going to get briefed later Tuesday night. We are hearing that there's going to be a war powers vote up Thursday. The House right now is out of session until Wednesday, and they're only in this week, Wednesday, Thursday. House Democrats have pledged previously, before this weekend, before all of the chaos is kind of unfolded in Iran, that they would bring up a war powers resolution in relation to Iran. And now that everything is unfolded in Iran, they have intensified that push and saying that they are calling Speaker Johnson to bring the House back even earlier on Monday, whenever they're supposed to be in recess. I am anticipating to hear what those Democratic members have to say on this 8 p.m. call. I think it'll be a very close vote on Thursday if they do vote on this war powers resolution. We saw the war powers resolution on Venezuela narrowly fail the House on a 215 to 215 vote. House Republican leadership today and their meeting has really emphasized how important attendance is going to be for this vote. We have seen Democrat Representative Greg Landsman from Ohio, who said that he would oppose the War Power Act, but we also have seen Republican Representative Warren Davidson, who said he would be for the War Powers Act. And in a super narrow House majority, this is going to be a very closely watched vote this week if it comes up.
Yeah, before we get into that, I want to get into what we heard tonight. Are we hearing any rumblings from that Republican meeting? What came of it? What potentially leaked from that meeting?
A lot of things to do with DHS funding. We know that there's a lot more pressure for DHS funding to pass. We are in a partial government shutdown right now. They passed 11 of the 12 appropriations bills, but they did not pass the DHS appropriations bill in time to meet that government funding deadline from the short-term continuing resolution. I think that right now with the conflict in the Middle East, that will put a lot more pressure on the House and the Senate to get DHS reopened. The House is planning on bringing back, and Republican leadership is telling their members that they want to bring up the House-passed DHS bill that did not pass the Senate to come back up for a vote this week to kind of put pressure on the Senate to open up DHS. But it is yet to see on if any Senate Democrats will be willing to vote for this bill because it does need to reach that 60 vote threshold in the Senate.
Yeah, and you mentioned the war powers resolution as well, and the ultra thin margin that the Republicans hold in that. What do we see unfolding, and what lawmakers are you keeping your eye on in terms of this? Because we mentioned Venezuela, and despite their similarities, there are some gaping differences to what happened there and what's happening right now. What are you keeping your eye on? Who are you watching for their votes on this potential resolution?
I think that I'm really watching, obviously, Warren Davidson, who said that he would vote for the war powers resolution. That's a pretty big loss for Republicans. Speaker Johnson, without any Democratic support, has a 1-vote margin. It is a super small margin now that Houston Democrat Christian Menefee was sworn in earlier in January. The House margins narrowed even smaller. We've seen some moderate Democrats like Rep. Gottheimer say that he came out and opposed the war powers resolution, but that was earlier before the conflict in Iran this weekend. I'm going to be watching him to see where he does on that vote, but I do think that it is going to be a very close vote, as was Venezuela.
How much frustration is there from lawmakers about the lack of information leading into this? Because this entanglement potentially could last 4 weeks, even longer. How much concern, how much frustration is there on Capitol Hill from lawmakers that they didn't know anything going into this?
I think that this is a reoccurring frustration from lawmakers. We've seen the White House use a ton of executive power since President Trump took office over a year ago. I think that Democrats have been more outspoken about this frustration and this lack of coming to Congress. We saw that frustration really boil over whenever it came to the tariffs, and the House voted to repeal some of President Trump's tariffs. I think that there has been some frustration among Republicans, especially behind closed doors, that Congress isn't being allowed to do the job that they were elected to be done, as some have said. But I do think that while a lot of them do wish that the White House would come to Congress and ask for the approval, I do think that a lot of them are still expressing that trust in President Trump, whereas Democrats are very frustrated that they are not getting the details that we need, as we have heard from Congressman Adam Smith, like you said earlier.
Yeah, and if we do see this war powers resolution go through, if it happens to pass, what kind of power does that have? Is that just symbolic?
I would say that it is more symbolic. That's kind of what some of the Democrats and Republicans have been echoing. I saw that some congressman from California was talking about, Congressman Swalwell, he was talking about how they need to do more than just, a lot of people call a war powers resolution, in quotes, a slap on the wrist. They need to do more than just these small policy things. They need to actually fight against it, and they need more information. So like you said, it is more of a symbolic vote, but it is yet to be seen because war powers resolutions haven't passed in a while.
You also mentioned that there is that ongoing partial government shutdown relating to funding over the Department of Homeland Security. Early this morning, we saw a mass shooting in Austin, Texas, as they are saying, investigating it as a potential nexus of terrorism. How much pressure is there on lawmakers to get this done as people are wary of the next terrorist threat, just given the light of what's going on in the kind of world?
I do think that this has put a lot more pressure on these lawmakers. Like we said, this is a partial government shutdown. Whenever there's a full government shutdown, lawmakers really feel the effects because a lot of their constituents are federal workers, and they're seeing a lot of people go without pay. But whenever it's 1 out of 12 bills, it really affects a much smaller constituency, which really takes back that pressure on lawmakers. But I do think, I'm in San Antonio, Texas right now, covering some campaigns, and I've heard a great deal of concern with this partial government shutdown from both voters and lawmakers that I've been interacting with. And so I do think that while it does intensify and increase pressure on these lawmakers, I do think Democrats are standing pretty firm on their stance given the situation in Minneapolis and the fatal shootings of Alex Preddy and Renee Good. I don't think that they will necessarily fully back down on their negotiations with ICE, but I do think that this will increase pressure to reopen DHS. We have kind of seen those stalled. It's been closed for some time now, to the point where I think that a lot of people have forgotten that there is a partial government shutdown going on right now. I think that this will definitely increase pressure and get some ball rolling, like we've seen with the House Republican leadership wanting to bring up this bill again.
Yeah, and since you're in Texas and there's a key Texas primary coming up in just several days and then several months away from that general election come November, and the midterms are so very crucial, how much are they keeping an eye on this, and how much might the strikes in Iran be fuel for what's to come in this campaign cycle heading into the midterms?
Yeah, I was at a Congressman Wesley Hunt rally. He's running in a tough Senate primary against Senator John Cornyn and Attorney General Ken Paxton, and he brought up Iran and he brought up Venezuela, and his supporters were all for it. Whereas I talked to some voters at a James Talarico rally who's running to be the Democratic candidate against Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett in another tough primary. These are highly watched primaries, highly big spent primaries. I think that a lot of them are toss-ups, but a lot of them are talking about these conflicts and talking about the president's war powers. And I think that their constituents are asking about it. Yesterday during the rally, a lot of constituents and voters were asking Congressman Hunt about these conflicts in the Middle East, and he was touching on them. He was touting President Trump, whereas today I think that a lot at the Talarico rally, a lot of those constituents were really concerned, especially being so close to Austin, having concerns for those around them and just really wanting to know what's going on.
Yeah, obviously those lawmakers, incumbent John Cornyn, they're amongst those that likely will legally get briefed this week. Lauren, anything else you're keeping your eye on? Anything else in terms of this with Iran, but also what's going on the primary? What else do you have on your mind?
Lots of things. I will be keeping a close eye on these briefings from Texas as I am here on Election Day. I'm going to be watching Congressman Tony Gonzalez's race closely. We've seen a lot unfold with his alleged affair with a staffer last year. I'm going to be keeping a close eye on Congressman Al Green's race in Houston, who's running against the newest member of Congress, Christian Menifee, and that's going to be a tough primary due to redistricting. I think that we aren't going to get the necessary results of the first redistricting push in a Texas primary, but this is the first race of the year since there has been a redistricting war erupting around the country. And I do think that it'll provide some answers on where voters are at and where voter turnout is at for the 2026 midterms.
Yeah, a very interesting one to really start us, to get us rolling in terms of this election cycle. But I appreciate your time. As if there wasn't enough to cover, plenty more on our plate. Lauren Green, thank you so much with the Washington Examiner.